welcome everyone. Thanks for joining
Amazing.
us today at our Lunch and Learn. I just want to introduce Gabriella Luttrell. Gabby heads up our conversion team here at 5 by 5. She brings over almost 12 years of selling digital out there in the world. And we're gonna dig into some sales talks, mastering lead conversion and
Yes.
turning leads into loyal clients. So
Yes.
obviously a big focus for us is generating those digital leads,
Mm-hmm.
but this is applicable obviously across, any other way that you're generating leads out there in the world.
Yeah.
Um, so when we were chatting and preparing for this, we were talking about some of the challenges that typical business owner might face out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the front line from a sales perspective. What are some of the challenges that come up time and time again?
Yes. So we are in a very lucky position here at 5 by 5 that we're very good at what we do. We're a digital marketing agency. So all of our leads are generated by our digital marketing.
Yep.
But there's no good in getting those leads if we don't do anything with them, right? So we can get the
Only
leads
half the job.
before. Yeah, exactly. And then what happens then? So we need to convert those leads, right? So the drop off between generating leads and then converting them into a customer, but not
Yep.
only a customer, a happy customer
Mhm.
who we are solving a problem in their life is really important. So that low conversion rate between lead being generated through to customer is usually can fall into one of two boxes for the reasons why. And that is number one, it's probably sales ability. So are we asking the right questions of our
Mhm.
clients and are we actually solving a pain point? But also quality of the leads as well. So both controllable factors, but both
Yep.
equally as important. Inconsistent sales process. So all of your clients, all of your leads that you're generating should be getting the same white glove process when they walk through the metaphorical door, whether that be a bricks and mortar store or whether that
Yep.
be a website, should get the same amazing experience between each other, and everyone should know where they are in the sales experience, and it should be open and transparent.
Yep.
Um, that way you're already treating customers how you'd want to be treated yourself as a customer, but also
Sure.
you're ensuring that things don't fall through the cracks.
This is the tricky thing for us because we can go and generate leads for our clients, but once it's in their ecosystem, it's sort of a little bit out of our control.
Yeah.
So that's then probably plays into the third point, which is like lack of follow-up.
Yeah. So I think there's stats if you don't follow up with a lead within 24 hours, your competitor will.
Yeah.
So most people, when they're inquiring, me, for example, I've just gone through a Reno process.
Mhm.
I went onto Google, I typed in build a Gold Coast or something of those sorts within the trade, right? And
Mhm.
then all of the leads that came up, I probably chose about five. But I looked on their Google reviews, I looked at their page and was like, sweet, I'm going to inquire with them. And I just
Yeah.
like point blank filled out an inquiry form. I reckon probably three out of five got back to me.
Mm.
And I'd say the first two that got back to me were the ones who I went through the full quote process with.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty consistent, I think, in the trades industry. And obviously, yeah, mate, they've got a lot of work, so they can
Yeah.
be choosy. But yeah, it's still doesn't instill a lot of confidence, does it?
No, exactly. And the builder I went with is because he was the one who got back to me quickly and was
Yeah,
timely before I was a paying customer. Because if I get treated like that before I'm a paying customer, what are they going to do after I sign on the dotted line, you know?
totally sets a tone for the relationship. And then I think like the final point is around this sort of sales anxiety where people see sales as icky. But
Hmm.
I think we're going to dig into this a little bit more in terms of just reframing that and more of that helper sort of mindset. Um,
Hmm.
so if we look at this, like everyone's sort of, seen a sales funnel before, talk us through some of these sort of key points in here, Gabby.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of people don't actually realize there's a lot that goes into the sales process
Hmm.
before you're even speaking to the customer, before they've even submitted an inquiry form or walked into your shop. Um, are your potential clients even aware of who you are and what you do? Say, for example, I'm on page, like I said, I did that Google search. If I'm on page 10 of Google, if I've never seen your brand, you could be the best company in the business, but I might not even know you exist, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not a potential customer at all. So brand awareness is the underpinning of a lot of what you should be doing. And there's multiple ways of doing that, like word of mouth, referrals, digital, exposed outdoor advertising, also outdoor advertising,
Yeah.
things like that. There's a multitude of levers you can pull to make people aware of your brand, but that is step one. People need to know you exist. And then from there, it's being able to relate to your customers that you have a solution to a problem which they may face.
Hmm.
You need to understand the problem that your potential customers face.
Yeah.
And then even from that point onward, that is where they might reach out and get in contact with you.
Hmm.
And then that is when the sales process fully kicks in. So you have to do awareness and interest before that even process kicks in. And the act is your sales process. And that's really the controllable factor here.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on the client's problems.
Mhm.
Really, typically the person that wins the sale is the one that understands in the most intimate manner what those problems are
Mhm.
for a prospective client. So that's then where sort of the client's journey is just a visual representation of that process that we just sort of ran through. Anything to
Yeah.
add there, Gabby?
Just that the sale is not the end point. The sale is the start of a really long journey. If you looked at your business, you'd want the start to the sale to be the first few percentage points of an overall
Mm.
client's journey with you. It's the lifetime customer is when the piece really kicks in of
Yep.
post-sales care, and it's what I think is the most important part because you can sell to a customer, but then you need to look after that customer and nurture that relationship.
Yeah, and it turns into a retention game and being able
Mhm.
to continue to solve their problems long into the future because the cost of an acquisition on a new client is massive compared to the cost of just retaining an existing client.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so just going into this a little bit more around pay points.
Mhm.
Yeah, as I said, it's our duty and responsibility to dig into those pain points.
Mhm.
How do you normally do this?
Yeah, so the thing I always try and do at the start of any conversation with a potential customer is understand what the business issue is.
Hmm.
So they will come to us as a digital marketing agency and say, I like a new website or I want some SEO. Like, you don't want a website. Why do you want the website? Like, what is the reason for you wanting a website? It
Yeah.
is usually, and the business issue is usually personal value or monetary value. And you need to dig into what that is. And then you need to relate and empathize with the issue they are facing. Most of our company customers, we're dealing with business owners, companies. This is their livelihood. Their business is their baby. And if we can't empathize and understand that the success of their business is paramount to their lives, then we're not doing our job at all. And I think being a naturally empathetic person and actually caring about your customers is the mindset you need to go into with every conversation that you have.
Cool. Love that. So, and just an extension of that, like how do you understand or how do you identify these pain points?
Yeah. So like I said, there's always like a business value versus a personal value. And yes, business value is usually monetary goals. But then there's a lot of the time of personal value underpinning what you're speaking to someone. For example, if you're speaking to a business owner who's also a mum or a dad, at the moment, is their problem causing them to be working all hours of the day? And actually, they would just kill to spend some time with their wife and children.
Yeah.
So it might not be directly linked to monetary value, but actually that is a huge problem or pain point for a client that
Yeah.
you can help solve.
Yeah.
So yeah, goes into the empathy. And to get to the crux of the business value or the personal value, you need to be asking the right questions. So you need to sometimes you feel like you might be asking too many questions of your customer and you might be annoying them, but actually you can't help solve a problem unless you understand the problem, right? So you need to be asking those questions.
Spot on. Yeah. And that catch-all phrase here is like, is there anything that I've missed? And it's almost like you keep asking that and asking that and asking that until there is nothing more. Because obviously, whether it's a digital marketing solution or, a renovation brief or whatever, that they will, we need to respond to those problems with a product that's going to solve that solution. So we want to make sure we get everything out on the table so that when it is presented, there's no objections that have been, brought up or things that have been missed.
Yeah, exactly.
So, speaking of objections, Gabby, what are some objections that you typically see out there in the world?
Yeah. Yeah. So I also think reframing the mindset around an objection is important because an objection is a buying signal, and it proves they are actually interested in your product in the first place.
Yeah,
So going into that conversation with the mindset of welcoming objections, which
totally.
is probably easier said than done, but it's quite important to try and shift that mindset first,
Yep.
is very
Um,
important.
so this old chestnut, it's too expensive.
It's too expensive. I'm sure we've all heard that, right? And I'm sure nobody wants to be the cheapest in the market because there's value there and you want to highlight value. So
Mhm.
again, this comes back to the questions you've asked your clients, like, do you know customer life cycle, customer average order value, what a customer lifetime value is to that client?
Yep.
Being able to work backwards and give tangible results that your product will help achieve over a certain timeline.
Yep.
So it's not expensive, it's the value that products provides as
Yeah.
well.
So we'll, when we go into this, say with prospective clients, on big ticket purchases, we will get a prospect that comes through. They might have like an average sale value of, I don't know, 40, 50K or something like that. And there'll be some good margin in there. But then like the mindset they're going into with that is, I only want to spend a couple of $1,000 on a solution or whatever. And it's like, if you can demonstrate to say, well, what would your life look like with, 3 or 4 of these are showing up in your lap a month? Like, would that be of value? And then it sort of makes it very, it makes it a very black and white, logical pitch in terms of
Yeah.
return on investment there.
Yeah, exactly. We were talking about this with the team earlier, and Lael, shout out to Lael, mentioned if you want the best outcome, you need to invest in the best ingredients. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's really important to highlight.
But I think it's also making sure that we understand that as service providers, and the client also understands that in terms of return on investment.
Mm. Yeah.
Usually there's something in there potentially around timing. Now isn't the right time.
Yes. Now isn't the right time. That usually isn't the why of the objection. That is a cover for something deeper, I'd
Mhm.
say. So again, just get back into your questioning and really dig into the why. Like, what is the actual objection there?
Yep.
And I think particularly in our industry, things can change so quickly in the digital landscape that there is always a cost of waiting. Um, what are your competitors doing in that time where you're not
Yeah.
taking action? That could set you a year behind where you need to be. So I
Yep.
feel really highlighting the cost of waiting is huge.
Yep. That opportunity cost there. And
Mhm.
there's ways around that as well, where us as a service provider can exercise flexibility and say, well, how can we like break this up into smaller chunks? How can we like try and cash flow this for you? Because at the end of the day, if we do what we say we're going to do, these are the outcomes that you can expect, and you'll be able to ride the uptick of those activities. Not sure if this is right for me.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, you have not come to the very end of a process and they turn around and say this. This should have been highlighted, hopefully, within the first or second call with your
Sure.
customer. But here is where you can really leverage marketing collateral. And this is where marketing and sales really have to have a very close relationship in terms of proof of concept. So, testimonials, case studies. If you're as great as you say you are, I'm sure you'd have clients who would be willing to have a referral call with one of your other clients as well. So I've had clients in the past who've spoken who are unsure if we're the right person. And we're like, speak to this other really
Yeah.
happy customer on the phone. Their voice of customer, there's nothing better than that as a testimonial for your business. Then trial periods or other assurances to reduce the perceived risk. Like most service-based industries, you can't really offer a money back guarantee because you provided a service, right?
Mm.
But there are flexible and creative ways you can get around this to help provide risk assurance to your clients.
Yeah. So in our instance, maybe they're performance milestones, something along those lines, where we know based on the research we've done, a whole bunch of other case studies, whatever, we can get specific results over a period of time. So yeah, it's ultimately just reduce as much of that risk as you can for the client so that it's a no-brainer. I need to check with my partner, boss slash wife slash husband slash whoever, significant other in their lives.
Who holds the purse strings?
Yes.
Yes. So ideally at the start, very start of the process, you'll understand the decision-making process and you'll understand who has the power to sign off on your specific proposal. And ideally you'd be either speaking to them directly. There's a strategy called multi-threading, which I mention here, which I really like to try and do, have a few multiple points of contact within an organization. Someone might leave, someone might go on leave for a long time, things like that. So you always need to have that backup plan, but also you need to find your cheerleader. If you can't speak to the decision maker themselves, then who is your cheerleader within that organization who can help wave the flag for you, but
Yep.
also, and then you can also work with them to empower them with all the information tool they need to sell that internally. So can you actually create a deck together that that person, even though you're not in the room, can then pitch their boss or things like that? How can you work with your cheerleader to get this over the line?
Yeah. And it's almost like camping out in the cheerleader's mind as well, because, ultimately they're putting their reputation on the line internally within their organization, and they don't want this to spectacularly blow up. So, it's like, how can you support them and even just like elevate them as a hero? Imagine them being able to implement a solution that doubles the amount of business coming through the door or whatever. Like, that'd be pretty cool.
Definitely. It goes back to that personal value. And is the personal value helping that person look really good to their boss?
You touched on this right at the start, in and around post-sales care. So that customer for lifetime sort of concept, and that, obviously starts at the sales process. If they say yes, then it's the onboarding process, it's the delivery of the product, and everything else in between.
Yeah. You don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, because that's when you get a bad reputation in the market. People talk, and referrals are the hottest leads you can get. The one thing I want to consider is the voice of the customer. So using the customer feedback to continually improve your service is super important. Like, you should be an extension of your customer's team internally. So
going back to, like the sales process and uncovering problems and answering questions, this is then where, you do sales for long enough, you get asked, questions over and over again. It's like, how can you layer in answers to these questions up front, so that ultimately you never get asked any questions or whatever, or you're on the front foot with all this sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And then I think the big thing here, and we sort of touched on this in our first slide, is around removing the sleaziness from sales. And the general mindset here is just how can we just add extreme amount of value up front? And the mindset is just focusing on helping.
Yeah.
Um, and I think like the frame shift is in and around, and I remember hearing this from one of my mentors like 20, 25 years ago. It's like, you have a duty, you have a responsibility to take your product out to the world, and you're doing that prospective client a disservice by not selling to them. I
Mm-hmm.
love that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You mentioned it earlier when we were prepping for this. You said you are the prize, right?
yeah, yeah.
So you are the prize. And going into that conversation, I think with you are equals and you're not a client and a vendor is really important because your product counts. Your product is good. We've said
Mhm.
here, believe in your product. You are solving a problem for a customer. So go in there with that mindset. Make sure you have the stats, you have the testimonials, you have the case studies to back it up. Because don't do that if you don't have the product. Don't overpromise and underdeliver,
Yeah.
but we always should believe in our product and we should have the social proof that we have a good product and communicate that to your customer.
Yeah, and like all of that that's a given, right? That you have an amazing product and it solves a problem out there in the world and all that sort of stuff. So, um, yeah, it's just sales is a confidence game, really. At the end of the day, my sort of key takeaway in prepping for this, and just sort of doing 20 years of sales is really like fortunes in the follow up. And specifically, I actually heard this on a podcast the other day, and I think we can be guilty of, say, we do a sales presentation, and then the prospective client says, "Leave it with me, I'll come back to you." And you then go into this follow up mode where it's like, "Hey, client, I'm just following up to see if you've got any feedback or whatever." Whereas, like, that's a bit of a lazy sales approach. Instead, really what we want to do as sales professionals is continue to add value. So educate, inform, deliver key, articles or content or case studies or solutions that we've implemented for other clients or whatever. And it's just the ability just to continue to keep educating, informing as you go until they make a decision. So that would be something to consider. What about you, Gabby?
So know your sweet spot. So we're saying we're there to solve a client's problems.
Yep.
We might not be able to solve everyone's problems. And you know what? Like that's okay. And if we're not the right partnership, don't waste your time. Like know when to walk away gracefully.
Yep.
Be curious. So actually be inquisitive about your client's business, their product, their offering, things like that. So then when you're asking those questions, it's an actual conversation, like you genuinely care. And know your numbers. Like how many leads do you need to get a conversion of X amount? What's your average order value? What's your lifetime customer value?
Mm.
Numbers inside out.
I love that curiosity thing. There's I heard it from one of my colleagues in a business group that I'm involved in, and the saying is be interested, not interesting. And you can take
Mhm.
this to all areas of your life, but generally being interested in other people, other people's businesses, rather than trying to be the expert, know-it-all person that's got all the answers, solutions, all that sort of stuff. So it's just a really good mindset to have that translates very nicely to sales as well.